only thing we have to fear is
in war,
fear itself.
there is no substitute for victory.
Let us never negotiate out of fear.
We stand undivided, forever united, fighting hand in hand for the liberty we've earned, for glory and honor, for our sons and daughters, ever mindful of the lessons we've learned. Let the torch of freedom burn.
President Calvin Coolidge said, "The more I study the Constitution, the more I realize that no other document devised by the hand of man has brought so much progress and happiness to humanity. To live under the American Constitution is the greatest political privilege that was ever accorded to the human race."
Welcome to the intersection of faith and politics. WallBuilders Live with David Barton and Rick Green. It's Foundations of Freedom Thursday, special day of the week where we dive specifically into the Constitution and the Declaration and those principles that made America the most successful nation in the history of the world. David, on every subject, we try to look at it from both a biblical and a historical point of view. Unfortunately, with our founding documents, we get both of those and an awful lot of both of those. Our founders were students of history, so they were factoring all that history in, and also students of the Bible, so we have some great foundations to talk about.
And by the way, for people living outside of Texas, an awful lot of those doesn't mean a bad lot of those. It means we have a whole bunch of those.
That's pretty good. Yeah, I don't even think about that when I say that.
We say that in Texas. We get an awful lot of that. And that means we got a whole bunch of it. It's overflowing. So we have an abundance. It just means bunches. That's right. It's bunches and bunches. And by the way, listen. I love the kids reading those Constitution lines and the great quotes from the Founding Fathers. And I want to jump over to parenting for a minute. I got a parenting question for you because you got more kids than I do.
Oh.
How do you get your kids to behave?
How do I get my kids to behave?
Yeah. How do you get your kids to behave? Because they behave really well. How'd you do that?
Well, there was an awful lot of bad behavior too. So it just depends on how much you're around us, I guess. No.
What are you doing blushing? You're blushing like this. What are you turning red over there for, bro?
It's not an easy answer. I think it starts with foundations. It starts with making them want to, teaching them what good principles are and making them want to strive towards that. But it also requires the other side. It's a carrot and a stick deal. You gotta be willing to discipline when they're outside those boundaries too. So I think it takes both, because if you just do the discipline, there's no joy. That nobody wants to obey and please or have any kind of pleasure or joy from acting right. So I think you have to do both. I think you got to have the carrot and the stick.
So how did you know when they were behaving badly?
They were acting like me. No,
acting like you instead of Kara?
Yeah. Yeah, if they were acting like me instead of Kara, they were behaving badly.
But what was your standard? I mean, how did they know when they were going to get the stick rather than the carrot?
Well, we had the basic standards that are biblical foundations, the Ten Commandments, and just going off of that and off of attitude as much as that. You had to lay out the rules first. I mean, if they didn't know what the rules were, then you couldn't blame them for violating those rules.
Okay, so you lay out the rules, and you're wondering, where the heck is this going?
I'm thinking, okay, where is David going? Foundations of Freedom Thursday, and we're talking about my kids and how Kara is definitely the right role model and not Dad.
Well, we're going to a question from Tim Barge. Tim has written us a question here out of New York, and he has two questions here. He says, number one, can Congress disestablish federal courts under authority of Article 3, Section 1 of the Constitution? And number two, what is good behavior?
Now I see where you're going. And in fact, I think a lot of our judges act like kids in bad behavior.
And what happens with bad behavior? Well, I'll go back to the Bible. This is a parenting class for a minute because we're parenting judges here for a moment. But the Bible says that a child left to himself brings his parents to shame. Guess what happens if you leave a federal judge to themselves? They'll bring their nation to shame. They'll bring their constituency to shame. And you have to have a carrot and a stick. And you have to say, no, that is not permissible. That is not good behavior. Now, how do you define good behavior?
And frankly, David, we probably need to tell people that good behavior is a phrase that the founders used to say, this is how long a judge gets to serve. It's not for life. It's for good behavior.
And let me just read it. I'm reading right out Article 3 here. It says, the judicial power of the United States shall be vested in one Supreme Court and in such inferior courts as the Congress may from time to time ordain and establish. The judges, both of the Supreme and inferior courts, shall hold their offices during, it does not say lifetime appointment, shall hold their offices during good behavior and shall, at stated times, receive for their services a compensation which shall not be diminished during their continuance in office. So that is the clause that Tim's asking about, and that deals with whether Congress can disestablish federal courts and what good behavior. But the question is, what is good behavior?
Yeah, what is good behavior? So we got to take a break, then we'll come back and we'll find out what is good behavior. I think I know what bad behavior is. I'm not sure if I know what good behavior is. Stay with us, folks. You're listening to WallBuilders Live. It's Foundations of Freedom Thursday.
President Thomas Jefferson said, "I know no safe depository of the ultimate powers of the society, but the people themselves. And if we think them not enlightened enough to exercise their control with a wholesome discretion, the remedy is not to take it from them, but to inform their discretion by education. This is the true corrective of abuses of constitutional power."
I'm Professor Radisson. This is Philosophy 150. Fill in the papers I've just given you with 3 little words. God is dead.
When your faith is tested, would you fight for what you believe?
I actually believe in God.
To me, he's not dead. He's alive.
God's not dead, he's surely alive.
God's Not Dead, the movie. Join the movement at the box office and say, God's not dead. He's surely alive. Now playing. Rated PG. For more information, go to godsnotdeadthemovie.com.
Let the torch of freedom burn.
John Adams said, "Our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other."
Well, welcome back. Thanks for staying with us here on WallBuilders Live, Foundations of Freedom Thursday, and we're talking about Article 3 out of the Constitution today, talking specifically right now about good behavior. It says that our judges serve for good behavior, not for life, but for good behavior. And the question is, what is good behavior? Great question from a New York listener named Tim Barge. And David, my guess is that with the Founding Fathers, they didn't put anything in the Constitution that had no meaning to them. They knew what those phrases meant, and it meant something specific. It wasn't just fluffy language.
It was not just fluffy language. And, you know, as you were mentioning a minute ago, how do you know good behavior, bad behavior in your kids? You say, well, you teach them principles, you teach them things like the 10 Commandments, and that's exactly what the founders did. The founders taught principles, and they had specific laws as well. And so in the case of principles, you say, okay, my job description as a judge is given here in Article 3. I'm going to read this, and this tells me what I can do, and it lets me know what my description is. I've read that, and I don't see that I have the power to make any policy whatsoever anywhere in this thing. I'll read, and so they go through, and what's missing is significant. Then you get the Federalist Papers, which was written right after the Constitution to explain it. James Madison called it the most authentic exposition of the meaning of the Constitution by those who wrote and ratified it. And so it tells you that no judge is allowed to rule according to the spirit of the Constitution. They can rule only according to the absolute written wording of the Constitution. They can't use the penumbra of the Constitution like they did in Roe v. Wade to find a new right to privacy that doesn't appear in the Constitution. That they can't go through and create rights out of thin air, which they do. So you have the Constitution, you have commentaries on it. You also have statutes that existed at the time. There were a number of impeachments that had already occurred in states, and so the states had good examples of what constituted good behavior because there were a lot known at the time. And then you have the Founding Fathers' own example that they set. At what points did they use the stick to whip a judge for being out of line? Well, if every other judge sees what that judge got whipped for, then they're not going to get out of line themselves. And by the way, Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court James Iredell, who was a ratifier of the Constitution, who was put on the Supreme Court by George Washington, he said, you know, you want people to do what's right out of principle, but sometimes it's not principle, it's the threat of terror. It's the terror of punishment that will deter them. And so he talks about you have to have impeachment of judges. You have to do that because otherwise judges have no fear of any consequence happening to them. And if you don't impeach judges from time to time, then you don't have a scarecrow out in the middle of your corn patch to scare off the crows when they come to raid the corn and steal stuff that's not theirs.
I wonder if that's also, not only does it remind them that they do have accountability, but it also reminds folks where the boundaries are. In other words, it gives you some examples of things for which you will be impeached. So it reminds you that not only is there an authority, but where that authority is going to come back in.
It does, and it reminds you where it's coming, and it reminds you who's in charge, because the guy carrying the stick that whips you with it is the boss. I mean, that's your kids knew not to cross you or Kara. because you're the ones that exert the discipline. You love them and they love you, and you got a great relationship. I see you guys in great family, great loving family, great happy family. But they also know not to cross you guys. And
so they have to understand who has authority, which is part of what you explained to your kids.
Right.
Here's why I have authority. Here's how God set up the family.
That's
in the same way with government, you got to say who has the authority. The people in this case set up a system of authority and checks and balances. So who has the stick for the courts?
And it's the Congress. It's the courts do not have the stick over Congress. The Congress has the stick over the courts. And it's real simple all the way through the Constitution. Who's in charge? And it is neither the president nor is it the judiciary. It is the Congress. And Congress is the one that has the ability to remove the president, and Congress is the one that has the ability to remove the courts or remove the judges off the courts. The president does not have the ability to remove anybody out of Congress, nor do the courts have the ability to remove anybody out of Congress. But Congress has that ability given in the Constitution to remove either the executive or the judiciary, either one. They can do that. So pretty clear. And the founders gave us a lot of examples of what they consider to be bad behavior, and they're worth looking at.
So Dave, we're going to go to break, but just one quick clarification. So Congress is the one that has the ability to remove another member of the federal government and actually impeach. Now, the court would have final say in hearing an impeachment, right? So when you say they don't have authority, the authority is given to Congress to put that. They're just the decision maker on the facts of the case, but Congress is the one with the authority to call for that impeachment.
Well, Congress calls for the impeachment, but Congress is also the jury on that. It's Congress that renders the decision, because the House sits as the body that hears the facts and issues.
And the Senate, you're right. Senate is the one that makes that decision, not the court.
The court has no role in impeachment. It is the House and the Senate, or the two branches, that decide everything on whether someone's going to be removed from office. The courts get no voice in the impeachment. All they can do is be on the court or be off the court, depending on what Congress says about them. The same with the president. It all goes back to the House hearing the facts, and then the Senate becomes the jury, if you will, and they're the ones that renders the decision of guilty or innocent. And if it's guilty, then you're off the court or you're out of the presidency.
And they have the final say.
Who's that?
The Senate has the final say on that impeachment. They get to make that decision.
The Congress has the final authority, and none of the other branches can override that. If Congress decides that the president has got to be gone, or that the judges have to be gone, the Constitution gives that process whereby it happens, and the only branch that gets to make that determination is Congress.
I know what was hanging me up there, bro. It's the fact that the Chief Justice gets to preside over an impeachment of the president. That's what it was.
That's it.
I knew I was thinking they had a role in there somewhere, but he doesn't get to decide. He doesn't get to preside over the. He's kind of like he's just kind of policing the deal in terms of making sure everything. He's kind of like the umpire, making sure they're operating correctly and all the rules are being followed. But the Senate's the one that's going to vote. They're going to make the final decision.
The Senate's the one that gets the decision. The Chief Justice has no vote in it, no voice in it, except just to make sure the rules are being followed.
Well, why would they give the Congress so much power instead of the courts? Because our perception today is that the courts get to decide everything. And we don't know whether something's constitutional or not until the courts decide. We don't know whether laws can be followed or not followed to the court. We have the court making all the decisions today. Why would the founders have put the authority in the hands of Congress? And then I guess my next question will be, how did we let it slip out of their hands and go over to the court? Two big questions for you. Got to take a break. We'll come back and answer those. Stay with us here on Foundations of Freedom Thursday.
Abraham Lincoln said, "We the people are the rightful masters of both Congress and the courts, not to overthrow the Constitution, but to overthrow the men who pervert the Constitution."
This is David Barton with another moment from America's history. Revisions today often assert that our founding fathers were atheists or agnostics or deists. This charge is not new. In fact, Patrick Henry was even called a deist in his lifetime. Clearly, no one could question his patriotism, but Henry was hurt that they would question his Christianity. Against the charge that he was a deist, Patrick Henry thundered, "Deism, with me, is but another name for vice and depravity. I hear it is said by the deists that I am one of their number, and indeed, that some good people think I am no Christian. This thought gives me much more pain than being called a traitor. Being a Christian is a character which I prize far above all this world has or can boast." Patrick Henry was quick to refute the charge of deism and to declare his open belief as a Christian.
For more information on God's hand in American history, contact WallBuilders at 1-800-8-REBUILD.
Let the torch of freedom burn.
Thomas Jefferson said, "In questions of power, then let no more be heard of confidence in man, but bind him down for mischief by the chains of the Constitution."
Welcome back to WallBuilders Live. It's Foundations of Freedom Thursday, and the foundation we're talking about today is really the authority of the different branches of government and how we, the people, set that up. We're talking specifically about judges. What does good behavior mean? When is a judge removed or the president removed, and who has the power to do that? Learned in the last segment, it's Congress. Congress is the one that has that power. And David, I was asking you as we were going to break, why did the founders give that power to Congress instead of the courts?
Because Congress is the accountable branch. It is the closest representative of the people. Congress is chosen every 2 years, the senators every 6, but the ones who are the closest to the people, who have to face the people the most often, are the ones that need to be listening to the people. And so if Congress doesn't do something, the people can throw them out the next election. The president, you get 4 years, the Senate, you get 6 years, but impeachment has to start in the House of Representatives. And if you have the judges, they can sit on the court as long as they act right, as long as their behavior is good, they can be there, but they're not chosen by the people. So as long as they're not usurping their authority, as long as they're not sticking it in the face of the people and telling the people what the policies are going to be, then they can stay on the court. But if they start overreaching that, well, you go to the people closest to the people, or go to the body closest to the people, and that is the House. And that's why everything starts in the House. And by the way, the founders believed in this so emphatically that you will find that there is no single subject that is covered as much in the Constitution as is the subject of impeachment. 6 separate clauses on impeaching and removing these kind of officials from office.
And yet we rarely do it now. It's almost like, if you go there, that's the third rail. That you're being mean in politics.
Yeah. Well, again, we let too much of what happens in Washington, D.C. be determined by what the media says and by what pundits say. I firmly believe that if somebody would go to Washington, D.C. and never open a newspaper and never turn on TV, they would do the right thing a whole lot more often. And it's just a simple thing, is if you shut off those loud cacophony of voices, and they're liberal voices. I mean, they're not Constitution-loving voices. You shut off that loud cacophony of voices, you're more likely to do the right thing. And in this case, we really do have a problem, because the $120,000 over the course of 12 years that we're putting in to educate every one of our kids in government schools is a waste of money. I mean, our kids are coming out of schools, and in the last election, 2012, 70% of voters did not know the Constitution was the supreme law of the land. Now, how can you go through 12 years of school and not be told the Constitution is the supreme law of the land? 65% of those who voted in the last election, who have gone through our public school, our government schools, Christian schools are public schools. They take all sorts of folks in. It's government schools that have an indoctrination in there that such lousy education. But after 12 years of government school, 65% of voters did not know the role of the judiciary at all, didn't know what judges are supposed to do. And 62% of voters, after 12 years of government education, could not name the 3 branches of government. Now, if you're turning out folks like that out of government schools, oh, by the way, some of those folks also get elected to Congress. Oh, by the way, they get elected to the Senate, too. By the way, they get elected to be president. I mean, why we think that someone in office knows more than the rest of us is nuts. It's not the way it happens ever. There are people from among us who just happen to be more articulate, or maybe share a vision a little better, or maybe look nicer than the rest of us, or they can raise money better. Whatever their skill set is, it's not because they're more brilliant than the rest of us, because they've gone through the same education system we have. So the problem we have is we have been taught for 50 years that judges are the ones who determine what is and is not constitutional. We've been told for 50 years judges have lifetime appointments. We've been told for 50 years that's the way the system works. And I've taken a number of tours through the U.S. Supreme Court. When I get outside the Supreme Court, I have to take the people out and de-brainwash them, because in the chambers of the U.S. Supreme Court, the tour guides always look around the room and they point to the majestic friezes above the justice's head and all the carvings on the back doors of the chamber and say, this is the room from which all the law in the land emanates. I mean, really, really breathy, like an angel talking to you. and and it's this nutty stuff that, what do you mean all the law of the land comes out of this room? No, it comes across the street, that big dome building that we call Congress. That's where the law of the land. But we don't know enough in our government education to be able to rebut the stupidity that's often told us. And that's the problem we've got. And so it'll be fun. We'll close out.
I tell you what, let's. I do want to ask you before we run out of time. We got one more break, and when we come back, I want to ask you what some examples are of bad behavior, because we hear that phrase. Okay, I know what it might mean to me. Let's find out some specifics that the founders actually used when they impeached folks. We'll be back in a second, folks. Stay with us here on WallBuilders Live.
Thomas Jefferson said, "In questions of power, Then let no more be heard of confidence in man, but bind him down from mischief by the chains of the Constitution.
Red, White, Blue, and Green is a new reality show following the Green family around the nation, rediscovering the American principles that made us the most successful nation in the history of the world. You can be a part of launching this new reality series by visiting rickgreen.com and clicking on the Red, White, Blue, and Green tab. Here's a sneak peek from the pilot episode. Rick Green coming to you live from the Lone Star State of Texas, a beacon of hope and freedom to liberty lovers around the world. Today I'm thinking about why do we do what we do? Because everywhere we go as a family, when we're traveling and speaking, someone comes up to us and asks, where's the hope? Is it over for America? They genuinely feel like the stars and stripes are fading. I felt that. But when I look at my family, whether it's my son Trey and his drive to exceed expectations, or Reagan and his love for serving and teaching other people, Cameron and her determination to outperform her brothers in everything she does, or my little stagehound Rhett and his boundless enthusiasm. Through their eyes, I see a vibrant nation. When my children stand in the birthplace of the Constitution, or on battlefields where patriots gave their lives, I can see in them a rekindled flame of the American spirit. The future of my children's country is bright because it's built on the foundation of an incredible providential history. A history of patriots and pastors, entrepreneurs and freedom fighters, mothers, fathers, families like yours and mine, who chose to live like their nation depended on it. And it still does. So when people ask us, where is the hope? We tell them, it's in you. Each of us, every individual, every family, has a duty to fight for freedom and add our voice, our color, to the American dream. For our family, it's red, white, and blue, and a little bit of green. To learn more about Red, White, Blue, and Green, visit rickgreen.com.
Let the torch of freedom
Abraham Lincoln said, "We the people are the rightful masters of both Congress and the courts, not to overthrow the Constitution, but to overthrow the men who pervert the Constitution."
Welcome back to WallBuilders Live, Foundations of Freedom Thursday. And if we're going to overthrow those that are perverting the Constitution, we got to know what the authority is for Congress. When can they step in and impeach a judge for, I guess, do we call it bad behavior, David? If it's not good behavior, what do we call it?
We call it bad behavior. And the Founding Fathers did that on a number of occasions. And by the way, the way this works, and we start out with a little parenting example. You know, I've got my 3 kids, you've got your kids. You don't have to get all the kids in trouble. I mean, if kid number 1 spits on mama and then gets busted for it, kids number 2 and kids number 3 are not going to spit on mama because they know that'll get them in trouble. So you don't have to do the same thing to all the kids, because they learn from the example of seeing another kid punished when you have to use the stick instead of the carrot. So that's the way it was with Founding Fathers. And historically, you find that the more often you impeached judges, or the more often you held impeachment hearings on judges, the less often you had to impeach them, because they controlled themselves. They were able to pull themselves under control. You look at what the Founding Fathers said was bad behavior, and it's not, you don't need a legal definition on this. Common sense worked. Bad behavior? We have a federal judge who is rude to witnesses in the courtroom. The Founding Fathers impeached him, removed him from court. For being rude to witnesses? Yeah, that's bad behavior. That's not good decorum for a judge. We have a judge who got drunk in his private life, and they impeached him and removed him. Well, wait, it's his private life. Yeah, but that's bad behavior for a judge. That's not what you want to see from a judge. We have a judge who used profanity in the courtroom, and they impeached him. They got rid of him because that's not good behavior from a judge. See, these are not criminal offenses. These are bad behavior. And if you can't control yourself, we'll help control you. And you know what? When you do that kind of stuff, suddenly nobody cusses in the courtroom. Suddenly nobody gets drunk in private life because the standard's out there. And
you know, it's interesting, David. You said it's not a crime. We tend to think of impeachment only as high crimes and misdemeanors, the clause for the presidency in an impeachment. We don't think about good behavior for judges as much broader.
Well, also remember that misdemeanor was not a level of crime. Today we have felonies and misdemeanors. They didn't have misdemeanors back then. Misdemeanors was misbehavior.
So it was also bad behavior then.
It's misdemeanor was defined as bad behavior.
Wow.
It is misbehavior. Now we have, Class C misdemeanor, Class D misdemeanor, Class A misdemeanor. We have a grade 3 felony, grade 4 felony. They didn't have that back then. They had felonies and they had bad behavior. And bad behavior was misdemeanor. That is misbehavior. So it's not the thing that you have to have a crime to do this. I mean, one of the judges got impeached and thrown off the court because he contradicted an act of Congress. Golly, the Supreme Court does that all the time. They contradict that. They did that on the marriage amendment. They did that with DOMA. And back then, you guys aren't supposed to be making policy. What the heck are you thinking? You're off the bench. We'll put somebody on there who recognizes the Constitution. See, that's all it is. So good behavior is not a legal term that's difficult to understand. We've got a lot of history. We have a lot of examples. We have the Constitution. We have the commentaries. There is so much that makes it clear. And we as citizens have to learn this again if we're going to get our elected officials elected to know this and then actually do it once they get in office.
Man, it's so important for us to know this and to make sure we educate the people we're voting for. Sometimes they will not be familiar with any of this. It's our job as citizens to bring it to their attention. So great information today, folks. Hope you'll share it with your friends and family. Go to our website at wallbuilderslive.com, click on the link, and send it out and get folks around you educated so we can save this republic. Thanks for listening today to WallBuilders Live.
Calvin Coolidge said, "The more I study the Constitution, the more I realize that no other document devised by the hand of man has brought so much progress and happiness to humanity. To live under the American Constitution is the greatest political privilege that was ever accorded to the human race."
We stand undivided.